Hello, Nobodies, and welcome to another episode of the Two Nobodies Gaming Podcast. My name is Zach, aka RPG Zeeg, and with me as always is...
Tyler, aka Albatross Hill. Thanks for joining us. If this is your first time, we are just two nobodies talking about their favorite slices of the gaming world at large.
And if this isn't your first time, we appreciate you coming back to the table. Enough of that, though. Let's get into this. All right, so what do we got for news this week? Couple of things. I just want to knock out the Xbox news first because they did have a couple things trickle out, not so big. Some other things very big. One of those very big things being their new marketing campaign. Instead of showing off their games, they're showing off their Xbox fridge. That's right. Tyler, tell me what this is about.
So apparently they're trying to capitalize on the memes and the people referring to it as a fridge. All the memes that we got right after the consoles were first revealed. They've decided to capitalize on it, and they're having an actual contest, sweepstakes, whatever the proper term is, on their Twitter, where you can basically win a full functioning refrigerator that looks like the Xbox Series X. And I think it's hilarious. I think it's only one fridge, if I'm remembering correctly. So one lucky person will win that fridge, but I think it's clever. I think it's funny.
It is funny. It's just kind of like me taking a swing at it already. It's just weird that has to be their marketing campaign. You know what I mean? Like, oh, check it out. We loved your memes about the Xbox Series X fridge. We turned it into a reality, and you can win this fridge. I'm like, how about you just make a damn game?
Yeah, I mean, it would be hilarious if they were doing as well as Sony and then decided to do this.
But this is just sad. I feel like this was in the works for a while. Obviously, I don't think anybody builds a fridge in a day for this, but I just like it seems sad. Like I should be more hyped about a new console coming out, and it's like I just don't feel that now. And even now it's like, oh yeah, instead of I'm gonna buy this console and maybe win a fridge, I'm like, that's just so odd to me. Like that's just so weird.
It is a choice.
It is a choice. I just don't know if it's the right one for sure. And then the last of the big Xbox news is another creative director, or I know he's a director. I won't try to like spin a title on him, but directors left Halo Infinite project. And we see this happen all the time. Game gets delayed, game tanks. There's creative differences. There's narrative creative differences. It seems like you're always hearing of a director leave. It's just, however, once Halo Infinite got delayed because of its A, poor visual presence, and B, lack of excitement from the trailer, whoever decided to string that together, it's just not a good time to be like an Xbox fan right now. Unfortunately, like your big launch title that's supposed to piggyback off of your console release is delayed. Your big new thing now is a fridge. You got a director that just walked out, and you can buy Monster Energy cans that have Halo printed on them for experience codes for the game, but no game to use them on. So now you got a shell of a whole bunch of old cans in your room somewhere to use those when the game comes out. Halo and the Xbox ecosystem currently on release day are just not in a good spot. They're just not.
And I don't want to kick Microsoft too hard, because I realize that people of importance leave studios all the time. You know, we recently, what was it, Vampire the Masquerade, that game I'm really excited about, but like 2 people have left that and it's been delayed fairly recently. But again, not to kick Microsoft, because that's not what I'm trying to do here, but I don't know if you saw this too, but apparently there's a game called Everwild being developed by Microsoft, and they just reported that the director was lost for that game about earlier today.
Nice.
So it's interesting. I get the impression something is happening over there, but again, it could just be bad luck.
The other thing too is, in this industry that moves so fast, there's always that chance that somebody just gets offered a little bit more money or something more stable for their family. Because at this point, if you're a director level, you're probably not the youngest guy in the world. You probably do have like an established family or just have a place you'd like to live more so than the place you work. So there's always a chance that somebody does just jump ship and go to another position or decide to back out from the industry altogether and retire. I mean, people have their myriad of reasons, but this is the second director to leave during the Halo Infinite project.
while I don't want to necessarily beat Microsoft up, and it may not say anything about Microsoft specifically, it does say something about Halo that this is the second director to leave for sure.
I think I'll call it now, and I'll say Infinite on release is just going to be in a rough spot. I I don't want to say it's dead in the water. It's just the last Halo game when it released, it released in a good state. But like after its first couple weeks of release, like people stopped talking about it. Didn't trend on Twitter anymore. YouTube videos didn't hit my feed. Social like media influencers and stuff just weren't talking about it. So it's like if you're doing all this work for a game that comes out every console cycle at least, and that's like your flagship game, and nobody's talking about it, that tells me you have an issue somewhere. And it's like more than your creative directors. It's more than just your narrative. It's more than just that. It's probably just overall this systemic version of your version of Halo you keep pumping out. It probably just isn't good anymore. It probably just doesn't resonate with a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of people are still into Halo because it's Halo and you know a new one's eventually going to come out. So it's an easy thing to be a fan of. I just don't see the draw from a casual audience like wanting to get into it. Like I just don't see it.
Halo seems to have, at least on my end, not being a Microsoft Xbox Halo fanboy. So really, I kind of only pick up on the pop culture hype and whether something's loud or not type of thing. But Halo definitely seems to have kind of fallen from grace and not really found its footing again. And that's kind of the general consensus I personally get. And it's interesting. I don't know if, I don't know if Halo is one of those games that like people love because of nostalgic reasons, because of the earlier Halos. And if it's just trying to do different directions, that's just not resonating. There could be a multitude of reasons, but it just definitely seems like Halo is not doing as great as it used to.
And the other thing to that too is like I love Halo. That's the problem with me, I think. And sometimes when that thing stops being the thing you love, it just quickly turns to hate at that point. You can see everything that's wrong with it. You start noticing its flaws. And the reason I love Halo so much is because I love the studio that originally made it, which was Bungie. And like we just did an episode previously, which was me talking with Lumberjack Stacks about Destiny 2 and how hyped we are for the next DLC. But like, probably if you like Halo, there's a good chance you probably play Destiny currently. Because like that is essentially the mind child, the evolution, if Bungie essentially kept Halo and just kept running with it. Like that's eventually what you would have arrived at, is some culmination of Destiny shaping the way of Halo. But I love it, man. I think it's so good. And the gunplay's so good for a first-person shooter. And the world they've built around it is so good. So when you have that to compete with, and then as an Xbox, a new Xbox you're trying to launch, you go back to Bungie and you're like, hey, our Halo got delayed. Can we use you as like our title game? Yeah. We'll be out the day before your DLC. Can we just run your stuff on our commercial? That's cool. You're all right with that? No bad blood that we took that Halo. You're good? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's sign a contract. I mean, I'm sure it's got to be awkward, right? Because I mean, the studio's still doing so good and they're still just making this magic happen. And then you have Halo that's just like slowly teetering on the edge of, I don't want to say dead, because like I said, I think it is inspirational to some people that like still remember it. It's just like one of those nostalgia games that you will always buy when it comes out, because it's not as common as like Call of Duty coming out every year. But it is a title you enjoy at least once, whether it's campaign or multiplayer for a little bit, and then you move on to another game. I don't know. I just wish it had more longevity and it stuck a little bit better with, like we just talked about, like that pop culture society, and it like kind of like hung around and people made videos on it, and it was just exciting. I wish we were in a time where it's exciting to be a Halo player, but like you don't hear that ever. So it's hard.
Maybe
it's hard.
Maybe it'll get back there. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know what Halo needs. I'm very far removed from first person shooters and that, that niche of gaming. But who knows? Maybe Bungie / Microsoft, not necessarily Bungie, but they'll figure that out, and
Right.
they'll get a Yoshi in there to revive that Halo. Who knows?
Yoshi.
But
Like that kind of Yoshi?
before we
Like that kind of
segue away
Yoshi,
from
Tyler?
what?
That kind of
What?
Yoshi?
No. The
Yoshi,
Yoshi P, like the deity.
Yoshi.
You've got a good Yoshi impression.
I know. Yoshi.
Oh my god.
Anyways, so go ahead and jump to that other one that is it actually is Microsoft related since they bought them.
Yeah, I figured if we're doing
Yeah,
Microsoft, we may
might
as
as
well
well just
segue to it. But
yeah, the next big
Todd
piece.
Howard is the big man at Bethesda. So not to be confused with Phil Spencer, who bought Bethesda. But Todd Howard recently was doing an interview, and he was posed the question, basically talking about, they were having a hard time imagining Elder Scrolls 6, whatever that's going to be titled, being an Xbox exclusive, because Skyrim, while being a great game by itself, and I don't want to discredit that, a lot of Skyrim's success really had to come down to the so many consoles and so many places it was able to be released. It wasn't locked to a console. It was re-released on so many different things and made available PC, Switch, PS4. It was originally released on the PS3 and then all the different Xboxes and stuff like that. Like, it being as available as it was is a huge credit to it being as successful as it was. And they posed that question to him, and Todd Howard, really didn't elaborate too much on it. But he specifically, in quote, said, "I would agree that it's hard to imagine." And he's referencing, obviously, to it being exclusive to Xbox. Again, this is not confirmation that Elder Scrolls 6 or any other Bethesda game is going to be Xbox exclusive or not. But it is interesting because these are massive franchises, Elder Scrolls specifically, that understanding and kind of managing your hype and expectations moving forward is going to be a big part with an acquisition this massive. So it is interesting. Phil Spencer made that comment about, I think we are in a position between our services, xCloud, Game Pass, the new console, to not have to release these things. But then Todd Howard is basically saying, it is kind of hard to imagine it being an exclusive. It'll be interesting to see how these things develop.
Right. Well, it is interesting. I mean, it's the same thing we reflected on a previous episode, which is like Microsoft bought Mojang. Mojang makes Minecraft. Minecraft, before that transaction, was on everything. PC, PlayStation, Switch. Like, I don't know about Switch before or after the thing, but I know it's on Switch now, and that's all that matters. iPads, iPhones. It's a universal brand that they bought for a lot of money for one game that makes a lot of money. So it's like you just bought an entire studio that does a whole bunch of games that have been universally loved on several different platforms. And yeah, Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, it almost seemed like you were almost bound as a hardware manufacturer to be successful if your device could run Skyrim to some extent. Like,
Yeah,
that's how much of a meme that game became. Like, it was like, oh, you got the new so-and-so phone? Can it run Skyrim? Because it was just so many ports. It was so many ports. It was everywhere. Oh, you have a Razer flip phone from like the early 2000s? Sick. Can it run Skyrim? Like, wouldn't doubt it. Wouldn't doubt it at all at this point with how many ports they
it's a
have.
testament to how great Skyrim is and how much you can do in Skyrim to begin with. But yeah, we've talked about it. I'm not a business analyst. You're not a business analyst, but I just don't see them being able to recoup that money the right way without, especially Elder Scrolls being released on multiple consoles.
I don't see taking something that people love for a whole bunch of different reasons and then taking that love and putting it in a tower like it's a damsel in distress. There's no way. There's no way you take something that like everybody's universally fallen in love with for a different reason on their own different device, on their own different method of playing, and you take it and you just lock it up in some watchtower far away. Nobody's going to come looking for that damsel in distress at that point. There's no way you lock that thing up in a watchtower. Because what people will do instead is like come to the rescue. It'll just be pitchforks, pitchforks and torches mentality. It'll just
There
be
we
a mob
go.
mentality. Yeah, I'm like, let's just light our. If you
Well,
light a pitchfork on fire, is it a pitch torch fork? I don't know. So
asking the real
find
questions
out
here.
on next episode of Two Nobodies, a gaming podcast. It's interesting for sure. That's how I view it. It's like you'll get more negative reception than you ever would positive. Like even if they do the whole PC and Xbox Series X, you're still eliminating a whole bunch of other ecosystems. I'm not saying Elder Scrolls 6, the next one that comes out, has to play on a Switch to be successful. Definitely not what I'm saying. But if you don't bring it to the PlayStation 5 ecosystem, oh yeah, a lot of people going to be mad.
Well,
A lot of people
and
going
it's
to be
not
mad.
just the anger thing. So let's pretend that Microsoft is just a greedy, money-loving corporation that hates people.
Okay, I'm on board. Let's go.
If their driving factor is money and they want to make money, they are going to make far more money making sure these games, not just Elder Scrolls, but their games that they just bought this company for, are going to release on as many consoles as possible. That's going like platforms. That is going to get them lots of money. Trying to already out the gate, it's not false to say that the Xbox is not doing the things that the PlayStation is doing, and based off of multiple analysts, the PlayStation 5 is set to sweep and dominate this console generation, and the Xbox is going to lag behind. You buying this studio is at least in the, I'm going to go so far as to say 5 years in your 5-year plan, is not going to convince people to go out and spend the X amount of $500 or whatever to buy this console just to play those games. So you're like, the idea behind I bought this studio so that you can come to us and get our console and we're going to convert you, like that's not going to happen. If you want to make as much money as possible, get these games out on as many platforms as you can and rake in that money. So
Right.
like it just, that makes the most sense. I can't, I can't get behind Phil Spencer's quote unquote game. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
I agree with that. I mean, that all makes sense for sure. At the end of the day, we'll see what happens. I mean, we've talked about it before, but we still think there's a good chance that new game that they're developing right now does go the way of exclusive. Was Star Citizen? Not Star Citizen, man.
It's like Starfall, Star something.
Star something something by Bethesda. That new space exploration game thing that they have planned or going on. It'll be interesting.
Starfield.
Starfield, man, we're always wrong. We're like Starfall. It's like no, Starfield.
Almost there.
Star Fox? Definitely not. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. I think the world is still very curious and everybody's still chomping at the bit, as this article demonstrates, that we just want to hear definitively what their plans are for Bethesda, which a lot of people love that studio. It's just that publisher. It's hard, man. Like it's hard to watch somebody else take over and start running show, even though they have a whole bunch of titles that you love. And we just want to know, okay? We want trust in the relationship. We want communication. Is that so difficult? That's all we want, Phil. All right.
Well, and it's not just that, but one, we're impatient. Like they weren't even bought that long ago, and really none of these games are going to be years out, so there's plenty of time. But we want that we want to know now. And again, like you just said, it's a testament to how great Bethesda is.
Yeah.
Because people love them, and we really want to know. We just want that security.
And we'll never get it. We're not going to get closure until that title releases, and then we see the commercial, and then we look for the logos at the end, at the very bottom, that say what consoles they're coming out on, or what devices, or how soon you can play it, and where, or who gets first access. Maybe they'll do like a month exclusive, then release a street date for everybody else. We don't know. I'm not the man. I'm just the dude, bro.
Yep. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Wait for the next event where these things get released and we get the confirmation, because that's what it's going to come down to.
Right. All right. So moving on. I think it's our favorite part of what social media blew up on this week.
I want to go on record before we launch into the PlayStation 5. We are 2 weeks away, as of right now, from that console release.
At the
Hopefully,
time of this recording, it's 2
hopefully,
weeks.
we will already have had them opened in our house. But let's transition to the exciting PlayStation 5 news.
You really think I'm not going to turn around and get this thing published in 2 weeks? You really think I'm that much of a slacker? People listen to...
No. I'm saying, like, because as of right now, we would already have it. It's 2 weeks from today. So hopefully we'd have the box already in our house 2 weeks from now and opened and all that.
Oh, you're saying if I was a time traveler, went 2 weeks ahead, got my PlayStation, came back. I thought you were thinking I'm a lazy piece of shit.
No.
And you thought I was going to edit this for 2 weeks and put it up after release.
No. I'm just saying 2 weeks from this moment,
I get you.
we'll already have them unboxed in our house.
I follow. I was like, man, that's the biggest sleight of hand I've ever heard.
No.
Sleight of slap right across my face. All right. Yeah. So speaking of PlayStation 5 out in 2 weeks, embargo lifted for social media influencers to finally open the box, give us that good old juicy unboxing experience, and to finally unveil the size difference of this console compared to every other PlayStation generation that has come before it. This thing is the reigning king a la supreme compared to anything else. This thing is absolutely bonkers big. OG PlayStation 3 trumps it. It's huge. It's taller than it. Not as wide, but it is taller than that console, which is ludicrous. Absolutely insane. PlayStation 4 Pro on its side. It trumps that too. So I was talking to Tyler about this the other day. I was like, oh, like I thought I knew how I was setting up my PlayStation 5. It was just going to be on its side. It was just going to lay just like any other PlayStation console has I've ever owned on its side. Like it's just going to be horizontal the entire time. Nope.
I saw that surface area you had to work with.
Yeah.
Hard nope.
I literally have just enough room how I set up my entertainment center where the PlayStation 4 fits right next to the TV on the same entertainment center, the same shelf. It doesn't go above or below it. It's right there out in the open. There's no way that PlayStation 5 does the same thing. So it is officially standing vertical. I'm going to use the vertical stand for the first time.
But we saw that teardown, and we know that it is going to be nice and secure in that stand, standing upright.
Yeah, I don't remember if we talked about it a couple episodes ago or not, but we already like officially unveiled and said like, hey, regardless if it lays up or sideways, like the temps are marginal at best. Like they're very minimal in terms of a difference. I don't know why I said marginal. F me. It's the other M word. It's minimal, right? So I was like, all right. It's like a degree difference, if that. And that's depending on the environment it's already in anyways and how well you keep up with it. So in terms of cleanliness. So I got nothing to worry about. I'm super excited about it. And I'm not, even once I got the disc version, but even though I got the disc version, I'm not buying a disc game for a while. Like, yeah. I just realized I'm getting Godfall digitally. I'm getting Destiny 2 DLC digitally. And those are my release games for the year, because I might skip Cyberpunk until later in the holidays. I might just have to do it.
I don't know. Like, if I get Spider-Man, it'll probably be like on a disc version. Because again, I am leaning pretty heavily to get that as a game to play with my kiddo. But yeah, I am gonna try. Yeah, like I got the disc version. I'm gonna try and maintain, getting disc games. Because if I get to the point to where I'm done with them, I want that option to trade them in for other things. So
right.
But
that makes sense. I get it.
Next thing, that we kind of saw with the embargo lifting and some of the other consoles coming out, or not the other consoles, but the hands-on with the PlayStation 5 and starting to see them in use, was that adaptive trigger. And I want to let you talk about the adaptive trigger, but I found this quote on Twitter, and it was by somebody who has the console, and I don't remember who they are, and I apologize because I want to give them credit. But the quote says, there's 2 next-gen consoles coming out next month, but only 1 next-gen controller. And that's how great the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller is. And I'm going to let you talk about the adaptive triggers. I sent you that video. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I legit didn't watch it, Tyler.
Oh, wow. So
I know
I sent you the video.
I've had a hell of a week, so I really haven't sat down and watched.
I'll describe it to you.
Please.
It's somebody's finger trying to press on the R2 L2, whichever one it is,
The
bumper.
triggers, right?
And it's literally like he's not touching it, and it's like bouncing and moving all on its own, like it's trembling and shaking, and it's a deep shake, and he's trying to press it down, but it's resisting him, and he's having to like
Ooh.
real hard press it. And I believe it is a friend of mine, either Fairbrand or it was Nader on Twitter, who brought up the idea of like, imagine trying to play a game like Resident Evil and like trying to fire your gun, but it jams and you're getting that resistance on the trigger and you just can't press it down and you're in a horror setting. And I'm sure there's so many interesting things that they can do with the adaptive triggers there. But it is, I me a controller has for me has always just been like the thing I hold to play the game, and to think that like a controller that I'm going to use is going to be such a pivotal thing when playing potentially, and like being a
Mm.
next gen controller, like it's interesting. I'm a little intimidated, honestly.
I'm cool with triggers that interact based on, like the environmental change or the situation in which you are trying to control, aka using your controller. I definitely think that's really cool. I think that'll be nice for some games. I think for other games, it could be really, what's the word I'm looking for? Annoying. Because that
Yeah, I
definitely just
definitely
seems
felt
like a PlayStation thing. So it's like, I hope it, I don't know, like, I hope a game is built around using that feature appropriately and not built as like a gimmick. You know what I mean? Like, I hope it's not so
I
repetitive,
feel
it's
like
just annoying.
I feel like with this type of technology, we'll inevitably get some gimmicks. I think for games on both platforms, maybe we won't even see. I think there'll be games that don't use the adaptive triggers at all because they don't
Hmm.
need to. I really hope Sony doesn't put studios in a position like, hey, use this adaptive trigger, use it. And then it becomes those silly, just shoehorned in mechanics for them. But, for some AAA studios, for Sony, some exclusive in-house, developers, I'd love to see things like people climbing on walls or on a cliff and like you're having to like grip things and like it's kind of trickier to hold down a trigger and like really builds tension and stuff.
Right.
But I feel like there's great creative ways to use them. I hope they don't get overused. I hope they don't get used in the wrong situations. I'm sure they will in some cases as people
Figure it out.
developers navigate when to use it and when not to use it, and when we the gamer like it and don't like it. It'll be interesting.
I think it will be too, but I'm looking forward to it. I think a controller, like I said, that like adapts to the situation, and they're called adaptive triggers. Go figure. Uh, it's exciting. I mean, it's something to look forward to besides just all the horsepower the new console is going to get you. I think it will for some titles potentially even set the bar as to why you should buy one machine over the other, and they're not just leaving it up to just software developers, game studios to come up with those interactions. They're providing them with that difference in hardware. We saw something a long time ago when people were like, "Oh, the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons, you can feel the rumble in like different spots in the controller, almost as if you have a cup full of ice cubes and you can feel exactly where the ice cubes are at in the cup when you go to shake it." I think that level of control is really cool. So when I keep reading these Xbox reviews and I keep hearing that the only thing that's disappointing is the controller's kind of the same. Like it's kind of the same. And here's the thing, we've talked about this off podcast too, but like I am not a fan of people that keep talking about the controller, because it's like that is definitely a feeling experience, and when you constantly just see every website write about a controller, I'm literally thinking they're just doing it for the content. But this was like the first article that I've looked at where I'm like, okay, this gives me something to work with. The rumble feels a little different. Maybe I won't turn the rumble off this time. But this with the triggers and like feeling that difference and applied tension on those triggers in different situations where it could potentially even jam or become very difficult and very strenuous to pull the trigger back, that's cool. Like I'm on board with that. That is what I want. That is an interesting situation I'm okay with being a part of. So it gives me another thing to look forward to. I'm very ecstatic that we're both able to get a PlayStation 5, and I'm still really looking forward to it 2 weeks from now.
Yeah,
It'll be
as a
nice.
as a big horror fan, I'm just all the options I go through in my head about the adaptive triggers and the things that they can do. I'm instantly applying them to like horror games. And I'm just like, man, that'll be so cool.
I'm gonna rip you apart later with your obsession with horror games, because I'm gonna say a couple words to you later, and you didn't have any reason to prep or preface this, but I got into a horror game, but I'm not even playing it. And I'll talk about that later once we get into like the whole reason
Okay.
for this, the later half of the podcast.
Okay. Okay.
Last things to kind of like rip through. Last PlayStation 5 news, then we'll get to the big piece in terms of news. The last two pieces involving two very different titles is console sales more than likely, because we are in the middle of a pandemic and stores and market and all this other stuff are having a hard time getting shipments on time and all this other malarkey. There's a good chance console sales revert to staying online for the rest of the year. That means there is a good chance if you try to go out on Black Friday shopping, which all of us Americans love to do, is blow our capital on these really low sales. But really, we're just looking for PlayStation 5s, TVs that'll run the damn things, and then also the Xbox. It's available. It'll be available. There is a good chance that these console sales go online for the rest of the year, and they do not try to get them to stores, and they just try to send them to your home. That way you're not having to go out. You're not having to interact with people. You're not having to put yourself in a weird situation during a pandemic. And that's the thing that Sony quoted. So this is coming from Sony's
Yeah.
wheelhouse. They're saying, hey, console sales for the rest of the year, after this first wave, you're probably looking at just online sales. So you might want to just keep an eye out on certain websites that we allocate units to. Microsoft hasn't said anything. I'm assuming they'll probably do the same thing. Monkey see, monkey do.
I mean, it makes sense,
That's
but
how
yeah,
that
they
works.
haven't.
So, what you can expect for your console sales: websites crashing nonstop. Best of luck to everybody
And I
trying
will say,
to
if you're
grab one.
listening to this and you still don't have your PlayStation 5, Best Buy did confirm that they will have PlayStation 5s up for Black Friday on their website for purchase. So if you're listening to this and you don't have it and you're ready, be prepared. Go to Best Buy, build an account, preload in your payment information and your shipping information, and be there the night before. If you're on the East Coast at like 9 p.m. or the West Coast 9 p.m. since that's midnight East Coast, and just be prepared to camp that site to get that console if you're jonesing.
So you heard it here first. I don't know. I'm pretty sure we're not the first to talk about it, but
Probably not.
probably
First,
not. I like to take that title when I can. If somebody wants to dethrone me, that's fine. At least they stepped up and told me. All right. Last thing, or not last thing. What am I saying? We got two games we're gonna talk about. One we're gonna knock out. The second one I'm gonna turn over to Tyler because he knows way more about it than I do. Cyberpunk got delayed. So instead of a November release, which we thought was the safe window, which they would inevitably push to, it went from April, delayed, to September, delayed, to November. October getting no love besides spooky season, apparently. We thought for sure the needle was going to rest there for a release date because all the new consoles are coming out. Everybody wants to be that first software purchase on the whole reason you bought one of these consoles and play that experience on a new machine. They've delayed till December 10th. And they've listed a myriad of reasons. The biggest one was because they have so many units to worry about: PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, PC, certain chipsets that just got released from NVIDIA and other people now, I think, will be out before that. Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S. They just want to make sure that all versions run at an acceptable quality level for everybody else. The game went gold. Like, the game's gold. Supposedly it's done, quote unquote. There's a couple things they want to add to the day one patch when you go to boot it up for the first time. Just some little quality fixes, but they said the main thing is optimizing for all these different systems, that they have to make sure that that first time you play Cyberpunk is an overwhelming experience for you, regardless of what machine you pick. Good on them for putting it out there. I understand social media is blowing up in two aspects. Cool, we'll wait. A lot of people already asked for the time off because November is only a couple weeks away. And, my condolences to people that will have to fight their managers to get a different day off. But, hey, try your best. And that's it for Cyberpunk news as far as that goes. Just delayed December 10th, a couple more weeks. I can wait. I'm good. All right, Tyler, hit me with that big old fat, that FF fat 16 news.
All right. So earlier this morning, obviously Final Fantasy 16 was revealed at I don't remember what the actual event title was, but when we got the price point reveals for all of the PlayStation 5 and all that fun stuff, Final Fantasy 16, we talked about it, was the lead trailer to start that event and was very surprising. And we were told that at some point in October, we would get the website to go live with more information about the game. And, Yoshi P, tried and true, held to his word. And here at the end of October, that site actually went live this morning. I'm not going to dive in too much into the lore because, we can do that in another episode. There's other things we'd like to discuss, but the highlights of things we found out about this news was that the basic premise of this world is that there are mother crystals. The basic premise of the story, mother crystals all around the world. They're like mountains of crystals that people build settlements and cities and surround themselves with, and it lets them have access to aether for magic, that type of thing. They're a very coveted resource. And obviously, because of them being as powerful as they are, create conflict, war. People want them. People want to have access to them. There's a blight. No idea what it is or what's going on, but it's going around and affecting the world and, corrupting things. And so that's kind of the basic premise of the story. The main character, we finally officially have their name. Main character is Clive Rossfield. In the trailer, we see him as a 15-year-old, and we also see him as an older adult. So, like, those two, thinking it was the same character as a young and adult, that was true. Joshua Rossfield is the younger brother. He's the dominant, or the essentially the avatar of Phoenix that we see in the trailer. He's the younger brother. And then there's also Jill Warwick, keep in mind that this is very much based of like medieval European tropes, where she's from another territory that the main character's territory, they get her, she's like a ward and is adopted in the family. I hate to go with the Game of Thrones reference, but think what was the redheaded that the Starks get? What's his name, Zach? I can't remember. Theon is his name?
Theon Greyjoy?
Yeah, so think like that, where the family gets him and he's kind of like a ward from another house, another territory, and they like adopt him. That's kind of like Jill Warwick's status there going on. And she basically sees Clive and Joshua as brothers. So that's kind of the gist. Icons are essentially summons. I mean, you and I know that, but for the people who are a little bit less Final Fantasy versed, they're summons. They're these massive creatures that are a force of destruction in the world. If you are a dominant, you're basically like a conduit for that icon to enter the world. And there's always each culture or place in the world or region reveres these people as dominance, as different things. The people will, in one culture, will treat them as like a god and they're worshipped. And then other cultures or countries, they put you on the front lines and you're like, you're this massive force of destruction. You go fight on the war on this front line and you're a big deal type of thing. So it's like everyone treats a dominant kind of differently. But when you are a dominant, like, it's kind of, by the sounds of it, against your will, and like you have to deal with the consequences and the hardship and the struggles of that. And so a very dark medieval European type story is being painted with some of these tropes. And I'm excited, man. I'm really excited. This, like I said, I was and am super hyped for the 7 remake because, one, nostalgia, and I love that game. But not since the 7 remake have I been this hyped for a Final Fantasy game, and it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, I think the other big reason, and we've talked about this before, that we're really hyped for this title in particular is mainly it came at a good time when we expected Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy the last few games has been like really about like steampunk, magic mixed in, time travel. And we're like, man, I kind of want Final Fantasy to go back to its roots a little bit, like some medieval, like high fantasy medieval setting, and that's exactly what we got with 16, like when we wanted it. No like magic in current day settings, no steampunk mechanics or magitech stuff, a combination of two things. It was just all, from what we could gather, the old Final Fantasy presence just like really ramped up to like that high fantasy that we all love and adore. So I was like,
Yep.
oh, this is gonna be great.
And not only are we getting like the general setting that we want, it's being delivered by a team and individuals, like we
That's
talked about
trusted.
earlier, Yoshi P, that have already shown through Final Fantasy 14 that they can deliver on these things. And
Right.
so it's not us going here like, all right, new mainline Final Fantasy title, like new group of people, like what direction are they going to go? Like, no, we know Yoshi P can do this with
Right.
14, and like I have nothing but faith, and I don't have a single. I'm not hesitant. I have no trepidation. I know this game is going to be brilliant.
Yep. We're all looking forward to it here at Two Nobodies Gaming.
But segueing away, now that we're kind of done with our news talk and kind of what's been going on in the last week, the main thing we want to talk about this episode is, kind of take a relaxing talk about what our personal just favorite games are and why, and maybe wow.
Not favorite games, but more so like oh wow moments. Like
Well, and I was going to say not just the favorite games, but specific moments that would just wowed us, regardless of whether it was our favorite game or not. Just the times
right.
that it blew us away.
Yeah, I know quite a few from a lot of different titles, but Tyler, before we get into that, this is related. I'm going to hit you with that horror shit that I was talking about previously. Okay?
Okay.
Have you looked at, I'm going to mess up the name already because I'm thinking about it, and I was so prepped to burn you today that I forgot the name. Phantasma or something like, hold on, let me look. Hold on.
Wait.
Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Hold on. I need to use ye old Google Foo to figure this out. So not Phantom of the Opera. What am I doing? Phasmophobia.
Phasmophobia?
Phasmophobia. Have you paid attention to any of that's been going on? This game has blown up over the last couple weeks.
No, I have not.
So this horror game, you group up with, I think, about 4 friends, right? And you're ghost hunters. Okay? You're ghost hunters. You're using all the tools in the book. Flashlights, ultraviolet lights,
EMFs,
EMF readers. You're looking for ghost orbs on cameras. You're trying to take photos when they show up. You're trying to do all the stuff your normal ghost hunter kind of vibe would. And it is the scariest shit to spectate. I watch people live on Twitch play this game, and I have my headphones on just like I do now when we record this podcast. The audio in that is so good. If the person I'm watching, just to give you an example, you go into this, of course it's a fucking barn. It's like a farmer's house. And you're like, oh, what's the person's name? When you roll up in your ghost hunter truck with all your gear and your 4 buddies, you can educate yourself a little bit. What's this person's name? Oh, it's let's just say Samantha Wright. Let's just say this ghost name is Samantha Wright. What you're trying to do, the premise of the game, is you're trying to identify, using your ghost journal, what kind of ghost it is. So for example, if it writes in notebooks, gives you threatening messages on writing, if it only attacks you when you're in a group, only attacks in groups, flickers lights or throws pictures, photos, cups, whatever, turns on faucets, good chances are it's a demon. Good chances are it's a wraith. Good chances are it's a banshee. Like, there's all these things it could potentially be, and you're investigating to see what kind of ghost is haunting this thing. Your friends can die. Your friends can get scared. They can lose their sanity in front of you. You have a sanity meter you're trying to manage at the same time. And it is insane how good that audio is. So like I said, when I have these headphones on and I'm watching somebody, sometimes a ghost will come in and it'll whisper something to one person and not the rest. Or one person will hear its footsteps on the other side of the wall, that like they're walking down a hallway and you know it's in the other room. and then suddenly it jumps and throws like a picture frame in front of you. Now it's in front of you. You try to throw some salt on the ground. You're trying to look for footsteps. This game gives you such a good horror experience without needing a lot of narrative to drive it. It's not like a Silent Hill where you need to know the background. Everything's fucked up. You have skeletons in the closet. You're not getting closure. It's not built around any of that. It's just like good old fashioned scary ghost hunting stuff. And I love it. I
Now, is this
love watching people play it.
can you play it one player, or is this really designed as like a multiplayer co-op experience?
So you can definitely tell it's designed to be an experience with friends, or at least an experience with people, like just in general, because like it allows you to queue up to 4. You're ghost hunters. You're not a ghost maverick. You know what I mean? You're not ghost alpha boy. I'm sure you could play it solo, but if you die, like that's it. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
But I've never seen anybody play it solo. You know what I mean? The group experience I think is really unique. But like
That
everybody
is an
starts.
interesting. I was going to say that's an interesting premise, and I'm honestly a little surprised it wasn't done sooner. Like that sounds fun and
The
great.
best part, Tyler, it's not super pretty. This looks like a game that could have came out in like 2008, 2009.
Really?
Yeah, it's not like the most updated thing in the world. And the
I'll have
best
to
part
look it
is
up
like
after this.
you can't sprint. It's not like what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like a Friday the 13th movie or even like a Nightmare on Elm Street thing where you're like, "Oh no, I'm going to take a shower. I hope a ghost doesn't get me. I'll just sit here and get drunk off this cake stand I'm about to do. Whoa, Mr. Ghost. Is that a knife in my back or are you just happy to see me?" You know, it's not doing any of those ploys, right? It's not even playing into the thriller element of it. It's literally just ghost hunting at its finest. And when they show up, you do not expect it.
That's great.
Sometimes they flicker in front of you and you think you see it. Or you hear the person playing it. It's like, I think I saw it. I think I saw it. I think it's coming for me. People freak out. People that's like an actual interaction. Or like people slump in their seats or they hide their face. And like
It
that
sounds like a great game to like stream.
it's such good content for everybody that's getting involved with it and good on them. But this is like the first time for me. I'm not a big horror game guy at all because I feel like my heart just can't take it. I legit feel like if I die, it's by two things: old age or playing horror games. Like the way I go out are those two options and nothing else. So I was like, all right, interesting. But I like it. I like watching people play it. I like sitting there and trying to figure it out before them too. I'm like getting all Scooby Doo about it.
Scooby Doo.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it's Old Man Warren, the guy that runs the carnival down the street. I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. I like it. It's really cool. So if you haven't heard about it, educate yourself, Mr. Horror Genre person. Get involved. Take a look at it. But I'm hoping, since it's been blowing up, I hope they come out and say like, yeah, we're releasing new ghosts. We're releasing new mysteries. We're releasing new maps. We're releasing new this. Because we're getting to that point now where not every game has to be high detailed just because the hardware can get us there now. And now you got to start thinking outside the box about the experience. And I think this is where AAA studios are going to suffer a little bit finally, because they're going to start running out of how do I sell that experience in another pretty box to recoup that money we made to make another pretty environment and sell that narrative to that environment. A lot of these games, man, like you can't leave the house. It's not like you can go walk around the whole neighborhood. You park this truck in front of these homes, you investigate, you're with friends, boom. Great experience.
Well,
Not-
I think
Not high
just
visuals.
to kind of add on to what you're saying, like not every game needs to be a AAA game to be successful. Like this seems like such a simple premise where you can like patch in new places, like you can do an asylum or you can patch a house or like this place in, and it doesn't, not every experience needs to be a AAA. Like there is so many great games to be found with like simple premises or small games that you can just add on to with patches and develop things.
I agree with that for sure, no doubt. But that is one of my first oh wow moments where I'm like, oh Jesus, I'm like, this is great. I'm like, this is really cool. I wonder if Tyler knows. Nope, he doesn't.
Yeah, I want to say I feel like I've seen the title around, but it because it's got, between Phantasm, Fangoria, like all of those types of things, like those names pop up, and it's like I don't know if I've actually really seen that, you know, game title around, but it sounds interesting. I'm definitely going to look that up.
Please do. And in the meantime, why don't you hit me with your oh wow moment? Because that's my first one. I feel like I opened up with quite the banger.
So I feel like I was talking with a friend of mine, Freyer Brand, a friend of both of ours. I kind
Freyer
of want to back to
Freyer
Final.
Freyer
Yeah,
brand. Freyer
yeah.
brand, not brain. Put some respect
Oh, I
on
thought
the
I said
name.
brand. I might have
Sound like you said
hiccup there.
brain.
Um, but as an avid lover of Final Fantasy, one of the games that really never captured me as far as like an entire game is Final Fantasy 9. It's not a terrible game, but I coming from my first experience with Final Fantasy was 7 and 8 and then going to the aesthetic style of 9. While 9 is a good story, it going back to that whole like medieval style when that was not what I was used to, and it being kind of like these chibi characters, and like the main character's got a tail, and I really liked the dark gritty aspects of 7 and 8. I really struggled with 9. I played it as an adult again and actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. But one of the biggest oh wow moments in games for me, uh, when Bahamut fights Alexander. You know, it kind of goes back to that whole Final Fantasy 16 thing we were talking about earlier, where we had in that trailer we saw Ifrit and Phoenix start to go head to head. These summons, icons, primals, there's so many words for them throughout the Final Fantasy lore, but like I don't know why we didn't have them fighting sooner. Like this idea in 9 where it's like Alexander or Bahamut go at it with each other was probably one of the coolest things teenage Tyler had ever seen in his whole life, and it still sticks with me. Like, I think about some of the moments in 9 that, you know, Odin coming down and throwing his lance and taking out an entire city, and I'm just like, man, they had some intense moments in there that really utilized summons in Final Fantasy, which summons are probably my favorite aspect of Final Fantasy. Um, and I'm surprised they hadn't done it sooner. I'm surprised they haven't done it more, though I'm thankful because I feel like if it was overdone, it wouldn't be as cool. But yeah, Bahamut fighting Alexander is probably one of the coolest moments ever for me.
That's a good one. I could see that. Because these are big brutes that have been used and reskinned throughout Final Fantasy, the numbered series, constantly. And yeah, they never really tussled before ever. Because usually your guy has it. Your character, whoever he is just this freak of nature that can wield beings beyond his understanding or imagination and he's just raw power. And then you never really had that conflict of power between the summons themselves or these monsters. So that's really interesting. True story. Final Fantasy IX is still the only Final Fantasy to date I've never played past the intro.
As much of a Final Fantasy fan as I am, I will go on record and say I have not played or touched Final Fantasies 1 through 5. I would like to go back and play them, but with them having such dated graphics, I
By dated,
struggle
you
with that.
mean pixel art, that which never ages?
Yes. Um,
You need what's the word I'm looking for? You need a different artistic perspective on a
I
sprite art, good sir.
and that's fair. But I played
Timeless.
Final Fantasy 6,
They are timeless.
and even then, Final Fantasy 6, you know, you hear about like what's the greatest Final Fantasy of all time, and like people will immediately go and fight between whether it's Final Fantasy 6 and Final Fantasy 7. And Final Fantasy 6 was great, and it was better than what I had thought in my head. But I really, again, I struggled with the graphics, and I struggled with because of the limitations of consoles back then and what you could do. I felt like there was so much in the dialogue and storytelling that was like it was done at a very breakneck pace. And in modern games, you really get to kind of sit in the story and really kind of like stew in the characters. And you get like small little snippets of dialogue, you get like side conversations. And so much of those games I feel like are done at like a breakneck pace that you really don't get to like sit in it and stew in it. And it just didn't have the same appeal as like 7 or 8 or more modern Final Fantasies did. Again, not to say that 6 was bad because 6 was great and there were definitely moments in it that it was like, "Oh my god, I was surprised." But yeah, I haven't played 1 through 5. I didn't play the sequels to 13. I have not beaten 12. And yeah, I mean, I love Final Fantasy, but there's definitely titles I need to go back and revisit without a doubt.
I feel you. I feel you. Tyler, I think I'm gonna put you to shame today, man, with these horror stuff. You know that? Because guess what? Another one is another one on my list for oh wow moments in games. Is a Resident Evil title.
I'm gonna pause you right there. And for a very long time, because you got to remember when we talk about like Silent Hill, for example, Silent Hill came as a direct answer to Resident Evil, and for a long time there was this whole you're a Silent Hill fan or you're a Resident Evil fan, and I was young and naive, and I got trapped into that whole
And impressionable.
yeah, I was impressionable,
And
and I got
peer
trapped into
pressured.
that whole like I'm a Silent Hill fan, screw Resident Evil, and for being a much bigger horror connoisseur when I was younger, I really didn't like zombies. Zombies are there's only so many ways you can do zombies in an interesting way, and they get kind of tropey. And we had this very big push for zombies, and I just got so overdone. And I was just, I heard the word zombie and I instantly eye rolled. Um, and so yeah, I just didn't really give Resident Evil the love that it had earned. I still love. I feel like Resident Evil has obviously it's great. Like it's still here, and what's Silent Hill doing? But yeah, I mean, I just I want to give Resident Evil that chance. But that all being said, hit me with your Resident Evil story.
Hit me with your bitch. I'm just kidding. Don't DMCA strike me, please. All right. So Resident Evil, up until 4, was known for a couple things: bad controls, weird narrative, cool environments, really cool action like points in the story, but bad camera angles was like huge. Bad controls was huge. It almost became like a meme essentially, like around the time of like Resident Evil 3. And then even once it translated to GameCube and got like I won't say like an HD remaster, but it got scaled up quite a bit.
Now, I want to cut you off. When you say bad controls, was it the tank controls, like that type of thing?
Yeah, and like when your camera flipped, you're immediately walking one way, camera flips on you down a hallway, and now you're at the end of the hallway. Your controls are like, what the fuck just happened?
I I will say that that is like both of those things are staple early survival horror
Silent Hill did that too,
PlayStation.
didn't it?
Yeah, Silent Hill was big on that, and that's why I'm like
Yeah.
those were staples, and that was part of like what built the horror and the tension. It was almost like
Fighting against
by
yourself.
design, these silly things, they like really like ramped up the whole terror by you just being like, oh shit, my controller's freaking out, and like these camera
Right.
angles. So yeah, like that was a built-in choice. It was I'm glad that's not necessarily a choice that gets adhered to today, but it was a choice back then.
It was definitely a choice. But oh well. So anyways, Resident Evil 4, right? Was like the first time that I feel like everybody wanted to play a Resident Evil game because they did fix those staples as we said. So like it's third person camera views. You're doing that. You're actually aiming the gun a lot more than you ever have in a previous title. Third person perspective, laser sight, big open area. Essentially, you're not like stuck in a house or any one area for too long. Resident Evil 4 had like one of the coolest like maps and architecture breakdowns I think in Resident Evil so far to date, but that's just my personal opinion. Because Resident Evil took its time from like being you're in a bad situation, You're authority figure here. You have some power to help yourself. Resident Evil 4 just like took that script and flipped it. They're like, you're a solo badass. You're not going to be a badass at the start, but you can be a badass by the end of the game. You're going to figure stuff out. There's a good chance you die. You can rub some stuff together to make a bigger thing that's going to heal you. But it made you feel like you were just constantly in the heat of action. And I feel like it was just the snapping feature of going from walking normally, doing whatever, puzzle solving, turning levers, picking up puzzle pieces, bringing them to the next destination to solve that puzzle. And then out of nowhere, you're just snapping and getting headshots. And then this thing just comes out of this guy. It had great visuals for the time that it came out. It was hyped up to all hell. And it was literally the only time I felt like everybody wanted to play a Resident Evil game. And then Resident Evil 5 comes out, focuses too heavily on delivering that action. Now with 2 people involved, 2-player, removing that solo badass feeling. Resident Evil 6 just went further from what made Resident Evil 4 so good. Now you're getting 4 people involved. Now you're juggling multiple stories. Now you're juggling multiple perspectives from several different characters. And so it's like, they had a good thing on 4 because it just kept going this certain way. You never expected it to change. Our staples in horror. They flipped that script, came out with something really good, sold like hotcakes. That game got so many remakes, so many HD remasters, so many re-releases compared to all the other titles that came before or after it. So like that game flipped Resident Evil around and made people way more excited to play a Resident Evil game than I think anybody has in like the last couple of years. Even the remake of 2. I think people were excited. It blew up. They still pulled a lot of features from 4, put it in that remake of 2 because they know they have something there. It's just weird that like I won't say it's weird that they can't figure it out and just keep that magic going, but I think they dropped the hat on the remake of 3. I feel like they dropped the hat trick again on the remake of 2 because it blows up, it sells really well for a time being, then it stops. 4 had so much magic.
I will say that, drawing the parallels between Resident Evil and Silent Hill, because they are kind of like 2 peas in a pod. Similar to how Silent Hill 2 is widely regarded as like the best Silent Hill. Now you'll find people who argue that 3 is better or they like the original better. Generally speaking, 2 is the best. And Resident Evil 4 is generally regarded as the best. And what I feel like Capcom did was saw the wrong things in Resident Evil 4 and said, this is what people loved, and took those things and it guided the direction they went with Resident Evil after that for a while. And it was not what people wanted and they missed the mark. And they really brought that idea of survival horror back with Resident Evil 7 and brought it back to that horror route instead of it being like an action movie, with no bite, pun intended. And
Heyo.
we get Resident Evil 7 and it starts to bring things back. And on your side, your argument about Resident Evil 2 and 3, me coming from like actual horror forums, at least within those things, people loved Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. The big complaint with Resident Evil 3 was that it was way too short. And it was one of those things where it's like, this, why did I pay a full game price for this? Kind of like how I felt about Pokemon Sword and Shield, where it was like, why did I pay full price for a game that was kind of not all there? Resident Evil 3 was super, super short, but really, really delivered, and people have loved the remakes and returned back to form.
Mm-hmm.
And Resident Evil 8 is looking to be great, and people are really, really happy with the direction Resident Evil is going. There's also rumors, and I hate even saying rumors because I honestly feel like with what they did with the 2 and 3 remake, it's kind of a given. But I'm just going to call it rumors for now. But they're remaking Resident Evil 4 right now. And if they can deliver on that, that'll be huge.
That makes sense. Makes sense, dude. But you're missing the one big thing. The reason I love Resident Evil 4 so much. Do you know why that is?
Lay it on.
Because it gave me my favorite video game franchise in the universe. Do you know what those 3 words are, Tyler?
Devil May Cry.
Woo, buddy. So that game only exists because when they were trying to do 4 originally, it was going to go the way of all the other Resident Evils. Fixed camera angles based on certain hallways you walk down, controls that switched on you. Devil May Cry, OG Devil May Cry, had like the staples of horror games, and it was going to be in a castle. It was going to be in a messed up, multi-layer dimensional cake castle. And you solve puzzles. You pick up something, goes into your inventory, you take it where you think it needs to go, solve that puzzle, open the door, kill the next thing on the other side. Every beat you would typically get on a Resident Evil game, this is my other next oh wow moment, holy shit, is they just took the main guy, Leon Kennedy, which was like, you know, action-packed and such a badass by the time 4 came around. They just took that persona and literally turned it up to 11. Dante is like the most charismatic alpha male dude that is also so laxed and laid back, but still willing to walk towards danger out of any fucking Capcom game, period. And they're like, this guy's so good, we're just going to give him his own game and see how it does. And it sells like fucking hotcakes. It just destroys the PS2 era for hack and slash genre. And it was so good. Not only that, it also had like crazy visuals for the time of PlayStation 2. What I mean by visuals is like the level of gore that they had in there, but they played it off like a Bruce Campbell style. Like, you know, it's like, ooh, groovy. I'm gonna chop these zombies up and be fucking super cool and shit at the same time with my chainsaw hand. There's a spot in Devil May Cry, and this one thing alone is when you know you just have your hands on something special. You go to pick up one of your new weapons. It's pierced into a statue. It's like this crying woman, and the sword is lodged in this statue's chest. And you think the statue's talking to you when you walk up to it. It's like, who dare, you know, disturbs my slumber, da-da-da-da-da, the whole typical RPG element. Who dares disturb me? This thing gets mad at you, flies out of the statue, lunges at you at a crazy speed, and pierces itself through the main character's chest and pins him to the floor. So this thing's just standing completely upright, and your character you think is dead. You're like, this guy finally died. And it's all because I wanted that sword, because I'm a greedy little shithead looter that wanted this out of this statue. You know what he does, Tyler? Do you know this scene?
I don't know. You know? I don't know anything about these games. Tell me.
He doesn't get back up and like take it out with his hand. From a laying position, he starts rising like a zombie would from the grave. And this guy must have crazy ankles and crazy calves, because this guy lifts himself up while the sword is still pierced in the ground, up and over the sword, just standing upright from a laying flat position. Doesn't use his hands to help him get up, doesn't use his hands to pull himself through the sword, just does that. And you're like, oh my God, I'm definitely dead. Like, if I thought I was dead and gonna bleed out on the floor, I definitely caused some serious damage pushing this sword through like my entire chest cavity just trying to stand up. For whatever reason, lightning strikes through a glass pane window that's directly above you, strikes the sword that's in the ground. All this glass is falling around you. He picks up the sword, starts doing crazy combos with it, and the glass that's falling has now frozen in midair, demonstrating to you how fast this man is moving while swinging that sword around. All this in the matter of like a minute and a half. So Devil May Cry for its time at PS2 had some insane choreographed cinematics that they played off brilliantly, and they delivered it with like a Bruce Campbell style like thing that like you just didn't see at the time. Like, it just wasn't known. You always expected like a God of War approach during the PlayStation 2 era, which was guy of few words, does his dirty deeds, gets out, is angry at the next thing. But instead you have this guy that's so charismatic and so poised and so over the top with everything. You just like, you had to fall in love with the character. Like, you had no other choice. That was great. That was like a perfect oh wow moment for me, where I was like, man, this game is something else. Like, I want to be like this guy. Because I was a young, impressionable 16-year-old. No, wait. I was like 12 or 11 or something. I was young, dude. I was young whenever Devil May Cry came out. I know that much.
I mean,
Blew
you
my mind.
describing that moment, that seems like one of those moments where if you're young and you're playing a game that you haven't really played that's like that, and you see that, like, it is so like that whole scene you described is so anime in like the best way
It
possible.
is.
You're just like there's no way you're just like, okay, that's not the coolest thing that I've ever seen.
And they don't dial down the blood for like any reason. So it's just like buckets of blood coming out of this man's body every second while he's trying to stand up. Oh, it was so over the top. It was so good. So Resident Evil 4 brought the birth, and now we're on Devil May Cry 5, which is chef's kiss. It's so good. And we'll see what happens because now they're talking about being done with the series. Doesn't matter, another podcast episode. But yeah, wow. One thing into another. Delayed game for future generations to enjoy, which was Resident Evil 4, ended up coming. But in the meantime, gave me something to enjoy during that previous era, which was Devil May Cry. Beautiful. All right,
Oh
Tyler,
man.
hit me with an oh wow moment.
So, oh wow moment. We're going to talk about Drakengard for a moment.
Oh wow.
And pretty much the entire second half of Drakengard is just one long oh wow moment, but you don't ever stop saying wow. It's just kind of like,
Isn't the ramp
oh
up like it's ramped up and I'm just staying up here free floating in the stratosphere and like I'm not coming down for like a hot minute till credits roll? Isn't that like the
yeah,
ramp up
kind
for
of
a
like
while on that?
you sit there and you're just kind of like the game can't get any. So here's the thing. Drakengard disguises itself for the majority of the game as being kind of like a Dynasty Warriors slash Ace Combat playstyle where you're just on the ground hacking slashing people like in Dynasty Warriors, and you get magic powers based off of what weapon you're using, and it's pretty mindless. And then you have these points where you're riding on the dragon and it's kind of Ace Combat-y where you're like shooting down other things in the sky. And it's dark and it's pretty brutal even at that point, but I don't feel like it's stuff you've seen before. It's not doing breaking ground or anything, especially narratively. And then you get to this point, and I'm not going to describe all of the lore and all of the small things that get you there because it's going to defeat the purpose. Because I truly didn't understand those things as a teenager playing this game. But you get to the point where you find out that you're like, okay, there's these old gods, quote unquote. I'm very, very egregiously
You're
summarizing,
giving
but
us the
there's
spark notes. Keep going.
yeah, there's like these old gods and this like existential force out there, and it breaks into our realm and gets released, and babies just start falling from the sky, and they're like naked babies that have full formed like human teeth, which is creepy enough. And like as they're floating down from the sky, like electricity starts crackling off their backs, and you can see that they have like dragonfly wings made of electricity, and they just float down and start eating everybody, Attack on Titan status. And I'm just like, what? And it's terrifying. It's straight up like, okay, like this just became dragon horror. And not only do they start coming down and being creepy, you have a character which the entire playable cast of Drakengard is made up of incredibly questionable people. Like these are awful bad people, like which again, if we ever get into Drakengard later, we can explain why it does this, but they're like, why are you giving me these awful people to play? One of them is this elf named Ariosh, and she is mentally broken. Like her children were killed in the war, her family's died, and she basically loses her sanity. And to make a pact with these elements of water and fire, in this game, to make a pact, you give something up. She gave up her womb so she can never have children again or anything, and that's how she has this powerful pact. So she's insane and can't have children again. Her children died. So her way of coping is she kills and eats children. And in her warped logic, consuming them is the way to keep them safe. Which again, I'm not condoning these things, but this is Drakengard. And the babies come down. You're fighting your way through this army of, and these are massive babies. They're like 3-4 story tall babies. They're not small children, but you're fighting your way through them to get to the last boss. And Ariosh basically loses her mind even further and sees like these massive dead bodies on the ground, and she's just like, oh my god. And like it's implied that she goes to start eating this massive child, and the babies gang up on her and they like swarm down and they're like, oh my god, we're hungry, we're gonna eat you. And she like looks at them and puts her arms out and literally says the greatest of feasts. And like you're just like, Ariosh, no. And they just swarm her, and it's like this massive thunk 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 as their bodies hit the ground and just start swarming her. And you're just like, they ate her. This just happened. And again, this is just like the launching off point as it gets into crazier and crazier things. And I had never, there was no Attack on Titan. I had seen some dark anime. I had seen Ninja Scroll. I don't want to get into the things I saw, but I had not seen these things in my video games. And I remember seeing these things and going, I will never be the same. I will never be the same person after playing this game, because these things are so crazy, weird, and insane, but it worked and I loved it. It was so good. And I have not really seen anything like that since. And Drakengard is a hard game to recommend. It's hard to be like, go play this terribly, mediocre gameplay for this game, but just do it for the story, for these crazy over the top moments. It's so great. Just go through and mow enemies down, 1,000 enemies like it's Dynasty Warriors. It's hard to make that sell, but man, I love that game.
Yep. That is it's a little rough. I tried imagining all that and that just overloaded my senses for sure. I think once we
Yeah.
got to electric dragonfly wings on babies that eventually eat a lady who ate babies, it just comes full circle, man. Comes full circle. It really does.
It's a crazy game. Tarioko's a crazy man.
Okay. I want your next one to come out because I'm pretty sure you're going to pick the one that I actually want to talk about, because I'm realizing there's a lot of horror stuff that we're talking about on this episode specifically. So give it to me, because I'd have to agree with you on this one.
So there's two. I don't know which direction we're going to go with here, but
It better not be the one we've talked about 3 times over by now.
well, so there's Dead Space
Uh-huh.
and there's Until Dawn.
Is that your final answer?
No, I'm just saying those are two horror games I want to touch on. So I don't know which direction you're going, but I think you're going the Dead Space route.
I will say this. Until Dawn I played, but now that I know that Phasmophobia exists, Until Dawn literally becomes that thing I was talking about. Until Dawn is literally the interactive version of a Friday the 13th movie. It is literally thriller interaction.
I loved Until Dawn because, one, Heavy Rain, I almost put on this list. Heavy Rain was a game, I had never played a game quite like Heavy Rain, and I love Heavy Rain. I would love to go back.
Heavy Rain was great. It was a very good game.
And it was like, Until Dawn is very Heavy Rain-esque, but it was done in a real true horror setting. And for a while, Until Dawn, I really didn't get into, because, like you said, it's that whole slasher thing where it's like the dude in the cabin and it's that very Friday the 13th. But when we get to the part of the second half of the game and you get into the Wendigos and such, and like the actual monsters, I was just like, oh, this is crazy cool. And I loved that you had all of these choices and actions, and you could either save every character or every character could die.
Yeah.
And it was just, Until Dawn was I got that game. I don't remember how I came across it, but I got it right when my kiddo was born. And that first like 2 weeks where he was home and sleeping a lot and I was home, I played that game a lot and I beat it. And I was very surprised. I love that game. But I feel like the game you want to talk about and that I want to talk about is Dead Space.
Oh my goodness. Let me just go on record by saying I have never played Dead Space 1 through 3. I cannot handle that shit. All right? Phasmophobia, the only reason I'm even digging it is because I can watch people play it. Don't hand me the controller in a horror game. Just don't. I just can't deal with the repercussions against my health. Like, I just can't do it. I'm not an unhealthy guy, but playing too many horror games, I'm pretty sure would make me an unhealthy person for sure. But Dead Space is some next level shit. Dead Space 1 was some next level shit in the first 5 minutes of gameplay. I did attempt that game. And as soon as you get to the elevator, which is literally in the intro, I put that controller down. I said, nope. And I stopped. There's no fucking way. The other thing I'm still surprised about, another no fucking way scenario, is there's not a fourth, there's not a fifth, there's not a remaster of this game. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. This game was so good, and it's depriving an audience that obviously wants it back again, just like Silent Hill people, I'm sure, want another really good Silent Hill game. And the fact that it's not available is mind-numbing. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Drives me nuts.
I will say that I'm after Dead Space 1 and 2 is phenomenal. Dead Space 3 I did not play. They went a different direction with Dead Space 3, and I feel like I mean, I don't truly understand, but I can kind of see why they maybe didn't do Dead Space 4 with how bad Dead Space 3 went. But we also see so many games where a sequel or a certain version or step in the franchise doesn't really land, but they still get to be made. But Dead Space was just not that popular. So I don't know, maybe Dead Space 3 was a nail in the coffin. But Dead Space 1 and 2 were so good. And to me, it's not often that with horror games where you have the original and then a sequel comes out and it's better. But Dead Space 2, taking the trauma that Isaac goes through with, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna slightly spoil it, but with his, I believe it's his girlfriend. I can't remember if it's girlfriend or his wife, but the trauma he goes through with that first game, and then like the way she plagues him throughout Dead Space 2. I remember there's this part where, she's got like the light glowing from her eyes and the mouth, and like you're in like a briefing and she crawls up on the table and she's like looking down on you. And like the monsters were scary enough, and you could have just rehashed that with Dead Space 1, but to like add that new layer of almost like the unreliable narrator where you're dealing with Isaac's trauma and he's being haunted physically by his ex-girlfriend, and like all of these, Dead Space 2 is just so good. I mean, they're both great, but those games, I get why maybe the studio went under. I get why maybe we haven't seen sequels. I don't know if we ever will, but I'm just shocked. And maybe it's because the studio went under, but I want a re-release of these games. I want to be able to play these games on my PS4 or my PS5. I want to revisit them without having to go through Steam. The Dead Space is just so good. It was great, and it was too short. We did not have enough time with that franchise, and I miss it.
That's the other thing too, man. When it came to the evolution of that game, because by 3 it was pretty much dead, right? Like wasn't as good.
3 went this direction. It was interesting. We had these 3 went this whole like co-op horror thing where you were Isaac and then this other dude, and the other dude had powers, and it was like it moved away from the horror. It was almost like this like co-op story thing where you and a friend could play the different characters and go through it, and it wasn't as scary anymore. And I don't know why they went this direction, but it definitely went away from the quote-unquote formula Dead Space 1 and 2 had kind of established, and just did not land. I had no interest in it.
Yeah, it's weird when you hit something off the tee so well on the first title, and then a lot of times like sequels and maybe not even the third title like bring it back before it's too late. A good example of that was like Devil May Cry 1 to 2, a complete different direction, still viewed as like a really negative spot on the Devil May Cry record is Devil May Cry 2. But then they bring it back full circle and saved it, thank goodness, by Devil May Cry 3, which is great. It's still a really good title. But I just thought that was really interesting where like somebody's like, "Oh my god, this game sold well?" Like I have to wonder sometimes, like when the sale report hits some dude's desk You're like, oh, what game did we release? Dead Space. All right, yeah, how'd that do? Like, I just want to know if they're sipping coffee before they spit it out, or if it's just raw spit flying out of their mouth when they see how many zeros that game made.
Part of me wonders, and again, I don't know the logistics behind why that studio went under, but I do, I'm gonna kind of draw a parallel from Dead Space to the movies, the Alien movies, where it's interesting to where I feel like when your premise is a sci-fi horror and it deals with like an alien life form and you're on a spaceship, there's only so many ways you can do that story before it starts to kind of play itself out. Alien was it was almost like a haunted house in a spaceship with this one alien. And the way to do that was expanding the lore a bit with aliens. And James Cameron comes in and it's like, oh, instead of one alien, there's a bunch. And you've got the queen alien and you really, really kind of blow it up. But it's like, it's not just this one small mining crew. You've got the army involved. And it was like, that's how you up the ante. But like, how do you up it from there without being like, oh, they're just adding a new alien and they're doing ways on this? Like Alien, arguably Alien 3, some of the other Alien movies, like after Aliens, it kind of quit being as awesome. And I feel like Dead Space kind of does that same trope where it's like, okay, how do you had this great thing with Dead Space, then you hit Dead Space 2 and you expanded on it a little bit with the markers and what people were doing with the markers. You had his trauma laying in there with his ex-girlfriend. But I almost wonder if they didn't know where to take it from there and still make the premise just as cool, or not even just as cool, but better, because that's the goal, right? You want to make the next one better.
Right.
And so like they went to planets, but added this other character in, and maybe it just got too big and it got away from them. But I kind of feel like that parallel to Alien is true, and they kind of lock themselves in. When you have a franchise like Final Fantasy or even Devil May Cry, where it's like you can kind of do these, you don't put yourself in a box that's too small.
Mm-hmm.
You get to really like go out and do all of these crazy things. And I feel like they almost put themselves in too small a box that like by the time they were wanting to expand it, there wasn't a whole lot of
Enough
ways to do it cool.
runway. Yeah. That
But
that
who knows?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and all we can do is speculate. That's the whole reason we have the podcast and we're not like a news or article writing situation for that stuff. Last one, and this will be brief, and then this is where we're going to close out for the rest of the day. Speaking of titles that turn around and have the biggest either a redemption or rebranding in history, but still take original nods from where they came from, PlayStation 4's God of War by Cory Balrog and team at Sony Santa Monica Studios. A fucking masterpiece. Deserved every recognition it got. Deserved every ounce of that Game Awards Game of the Year trophy. Whatever the total pound on that is. I don't know. Jeff Keighley will have to tweet at me or something about it, which he won't. You guys way too big. Revamping a series which went from, hi, I'm a dude that kills everything from the PlayStation 2 area, fucks everything along the way, and eventually I kill every god on Mount Olympus, to, hi, there's no more gods where I came from, the world went to shit, Norse mythology is now taken over, and you're about to learn a lot about me. Literally takes the meme, everybody wonders where is Kratos, but nobody ever wonders how is Kratos. Like, talk about a character that had no emotional anything other than, previous family loss, horrible upbringing, super vengeful, super rage the entire time, just constantly seeing red, to a guy that has such an emotional connection that you don't, like, you go into God of War PlayStation 4 from the back history of the previous games, and you're like, I'm ready to mess some shit up. And the thing that starts getting messed up first is you, the player. Like, you, the player, start getting emotionally attached, and you start getting so many emotions volleyed at you. Like, the game's been out forever, so, spoilers coming up. But, like, you lose your wife. You were still the god of war. You're still Kratos. You never emotionally got attached to much. Even when you buried your wife, you did it in silence. Like, you're just that kind of person. You just buried all your shit. Now she's left you with your son. who you've never really emotionally connected with. He's always been at her side, and now it's up to you to start raising this kid. This game came out at such a pivotal point in my life because this game hit on so much shit that I was going through. New dad, some shit at home I had to deal with, all this other shit, and trying to figure this stuff out. And this game comes out of nowhere. I cried so many times on this game. Not from like a blubbery whale crying, like popping out of the ocean to sing my whale song, and then dive back into the water into my own tears. Not like that. I was just so fucked up by the end of the game because there's just all these hints that like the mom was like there on their adventure. There's just all these little subtleties and things like that. You went from a game that had nothing to give you or supply you emotionally, which came out probably around a lot of our like youthful teen years and where we're just angry and hormonal and all this shit, to a character that's now been revamped so much. The man now has a beard, which played off really well. And they had such good captivating story and script writing. And the fact that there is a second one coming out to PlayStation 5, and it's pretty close. Like they said, this thing's like ready to go, essentially. And they're like stopped production on this one and then went straight into the second one because they knew what they had. That's nutty. That's such a nutty revamp. And the combat was completely different. Third person perspective versus fixed camera over the head. PlayStation 2 era camera tricks versus next gen shit what you're capable of doing with new hardware. But they did so many amazing tricks. This is a game that didn't turn off the camera once. There's some tricks to like turn off the camera in development space, but it's a complete narrative from start to finish with one single rolling camera. You'll never find the camera break. You'll never find the camera load. You'll never see it. So you're just constantly in it. You never get pulled out of the experience. That's nuts. That's insane. That was crazy.
Well, and I think it's amazing because, you know, again, my familiarity with God of War is kind of like Halo, where I'm aware of it through the pop culture and not necessarily hands-on. And I did have a friend who played it when we were younger, but I knew the basic premise of God of War. Well, I don't know how many there was, but I think it was 1 through 3 was what it was.
Yeah, and then there was like some PSP, PS Vita separated titles, like a God of War. I think God of War, and then there was like God of War Ascension. There was like some spin-off other ones, still same narrative, just different parts. It like kind of did some filler sections with different
games. I was aware of the basic premise of you are Kratos, you're a god, and you go and kill throughout these games the entire Greek pantheon, basically.
Yeah.
And you sleep with a lot of women, and it's very violent, very just like
mature,
brutal game. And like, that was all I knew. And I was just like, okay. And like, from my understanding, the game's kind of vanished after he defeated the entire Greek pantheon. But for this game to come out and then to tackle Norse mythology, and not just in this game, but then you've got Ragnarok going on in the next game, obviously.
Right.
It just opens up the whole like, oh my God, they were able to adapt this. And like, they don't have to stop with Norse mythology. Like, Norse mythology, I feel like over the last decade has really blown up in pop culture.
Right.
And it's great that they're capitalizing on that. But like, they could tackle Egyptian pantheons. They could go Christian pantheons. There's so many like religions and like pantheons they could tackle where like it doesn't like they could just keep going if they keep developing emotionally impactful stories around these things. Like, It's great. I think it's awesome.
I just want to throw it out there. If we got Christian pantheons,
so many people would be upset.
Like not only that, but I literally would lose my shit. I would bust a gut or probably have like a ruptured gallbladder or something if I saw Kratos go toe to toe with Jesus Christ. Like, I imagine Jesus walking up to Kratos, taking off his sandal, and like engaging in combat by slapping Kratos. But when he does, he like flies through like a mountain. Like, you know what I mean? Like Dragon Ball Z hit, like punched once, and then the guy just goes flying, and the camera's trying to keep up and follow him as he's just like ripping through different layers of a mountaintop or some shit. I could totally see it. I imagine
I have no
that
idea
now.
how they would tackle that, but the point is the possibilities are endless. Like
Yeah.
for them to have gone from Greek to Norse and then crush it and do such a great story, like
But I think you only move on it if the narrative backs it up, especially now, because now they've turned God of War into like this heavily spun, I won't say heavily spun, but like there's good narrative in there now. It's not just I'm angry, oh, I want revenge for 3 games, 7 games in a row. It's I need to know what the next growth step is for Kratos. Like that's what I want to know. Like what's the next father-son bonding moment? What's the next experience he gets? What's Kratos gonna feel? This is like the first time I've ever been connected to this character on such a deep level. I'm like, this guy has so many ghosts in the closet. He's got so much mental instability. He's been such a different person this entire time. I was like, this is insane. I was like, this is crazy.
yeah, and I definitely don't think the goal should be, oh, let's rush off to tackle all these
Nah,
pantheons.
not with Corey.
Obviously,
Not with
they're
Corey driving it. There's no way. That guy's so
like
good.
they're obviously going to sit in Norse mythology for a bit. They did this first game with Norse mythology, and they're obviously addressing Ragnarok now. So like
Right.
they've got a vision. But for them to have switched pantheons and to up the emotional narrative and just the quality of the game this much and to nail it that hard and well, I feel like if they really get to address the Norse mythology, let's say over 3 games, the way they want to, I'm confident that they could take that and go to a different pantheon. I feel like Egyptian would be great, and really get to like bring out an even better or more different narrative. Seeing how they were able to do it so well, I'm just confident that they could do those things.
Right.
But we'll see. We'll see the direction God of War is, because kind of going back to that whole like, if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and he just keeps going to pantheon, like will we want to make that journey if we just predict it all the time?
I have a feeling we'll get to a point where it won't be Kratos anymore, because now that like we view him as like a father figure, like us being dads, like there's that passing of the torch essentially, where like you've done all that you can, and now it's just time for you to do your thing best that you're capable of at whatever point that you're passing, quote unquote, the torch, or passing that initial responsibility. And it goes the same thing. It doesn't have to be like a father-son experience. It could be father-daughter too. It can be anything, as long as it's your child and you're just passing something along. It's that feeling, it's that emotional experience you get with it. That is like unparalleled. Like unless you're a parent, there are probably a lot of things then in this new God of War that just literally skated over you, because like you don't have that instinct and like some people, even when they have kids, man, like you just don't get that instinct. But like there's just certain things you pay attention to that might have happened with you actually raising your kid, and you're like, oh, that's funny, like I actually just had something like that happen with my kid. That's hilarious. And then it happens in that game, and then you start to realize like the guy that wrote this gets it. The guy that wrote this has to be a parent. The studio that backed this guy's narrative has to understand it. There's a reason this part wasn't cut out, because I just felt what just happened on screen and what was played out. Like, because you haven't played it yet, right, Tyler?
Oh, no.
Jesus, dude. So, wait,
it is one of those titles I'm going to play on the.
Hold on.
The
Is it in the PlayStation collection?
Yep.
Okay. When that comes out, like holiday break, vacation break, whatever you get, it's sit down and play that time.
Whenever it is the first game I am going to play when I don't have my kiddo sitting there watching the whole time, because I don't feel like it's an appropriate game.
I think it's more appropriate than the previous titles. I'll give it that much. But that's because like blood isn't I know, like blood isn't splashing in gallons everywhere. You know, because PS2 you really had to articulate to show it on screen. You really had to over justify your actions to really get it to show up. Now it's like it's subtle. Like it's like, oh, like you know that thing died. Like there's no doubt in that. You're swinging an axe. That thing's definitely dead. But it's not as like vulgar of an image as what it was shown previously. You're like, what's going on?
Right.
I'm just chopping up some steaks, son. And then you're out of trouble. Just like that.
We will see, but it's definitely one of the first games I want to play when I have like me time.
Right. All right, guys. In the meantime, we're going to get out of here. This is Two Nobodies, a gaming podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, the Instagram, right? The Instagram? Yeah, the Instagram at 2 Nobodies Gaming. And that 2, that's a number, not spelled out. You can follow me, one of your hosts, RPG Zieg, Z-I-E-G, aka Zach. I prefer if you followed me over on the Twitters. And then, Tyler, tell the good people, the good nobodies, where they can find you at.
I am Albatross Hill. I am also on Twitter and Instagram. The 2 Nobodies Gaming podcast can also be found on YouTube and Acast. We will be on other podcast platforms in the not too distant future, but for now, look for us on those social medias. And in the meantime, game on.
Game on, guys. Later.